Well, folks, thank you for joining us on yet another email talk. We're going to be closing out the 2025 year with Chief Operating Officer of Optismo, Tom Wozniak. He almost needs no introduction, but we'll just say that he is, and this has been reported upon, he's one of the OGs of this space. And just to tell you a little bit about Optismo, they are the leaders in email suppression list management, and we're going to be getting more into that. A lot of you are already familiar with it. But first of all, Tom, it's an honor to speak one-on-one with you.
Hey, Paul, it's always nice to chat. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to start out with what may seem like an ocean of a question, but I really want to know, Tom, what can an email do?
Interesting question. One I haven't been asked before, which is always fun. I guess that's a really multifaceted answer. Email is a communication channel, been around, 40 plus years now. First email went out in the 1970s, if we can possibly believe that. Initially wasn't necessarily thought of as something with commercial or marketing potential or purpose. It was really about communication. It's kind of it was truly electronic mail. Take the written word that you would have previously put on a piece of paper and put it in an envelope and mailed through the postal service, and instead do it all digitally through the computer. So it was really more about streamlining communications between two people, very one-to-one. And yet today we think of email probably, I think most people think of it very differently. We do, certainly, because we're in the email industry. And so for us, the real focus is on the business side of it as much as anything else. And sure, we have our inboxes where we communicate with clients, partners, vendors, people in the space, those kind of things. But we also think of it in terms of true business and scale and companies reaching out to consumers, at volume, for whether it's marketing purposes or transactional email with, invoices and bills. And then I guess you'd even take it a step further, and it may not be the email itself, but your email address has become so core to functioning online. It's always been funny to me when, as prognosticators do on an annual basis, just to get, I think, clicks, say, we're going to predict the end of email, something's going to kill it, social, mobile, whatever the heck. Been happening for decades. But one of the big things they forget is that simply, your email address is your login to everything. Your digital life is built around an email address these days. And someday that may change, but for now, email is really core to how all of us function on a daily basis, whether we think of it that way or not.
Absolutely. It's amazing, all the different ramifications. Now, I know that Tom Wozniak is not going to be predicting an end of email coming next year, but it's always fun to talk to people in the industry and see, do you have any possible predictions for email in 2026? Anything that you're noticing now that you think could get bigger or anything like that?
Sure. I think I'd probably be remiss in anybody if you're going to talk about predictions, forecasts for next year. AI probably, if you don't include that, they're going to think you're crazy. But I think I recently sent in a prediction to a group that I belong to that was kind of collecting for an article, predictions marketing wise and email marketing wise, and, things that we think we'll see. And I tried to be a little contrarian because I know I've certainly predicted in years past, AI, boy, it's going to be big this year. It's going to make a big impact in the way we function within email marketing, yada, yada. But I actually wanted to take kind of an alternate step on that, or contrarian step, which is, AI is clearly, it's here. It's evolving. It's coming fast. It's going to disrupt everything, eventually. But I'm going to maybe tap the brakes a little bit on it, replacing everybody in the next year or couple of years, where all of a sudden all of our jobs are going to, go away, or even just all entry-level jobs are going to go away, or whatever the predictions are. I still imagine that, if we step out a little bit long enough, AI is going to dramatically impact jobs. The entire working world is going to be impacted by it in various ways. It's very disruptive. Society is just going to be impacted. There's a whole lot to unpack there that we will not go into today. But I think, you'll definitely find some people who are like, oh my God, in the next 12 months, suddenly 50% of people are going to be out of work. It's like, I don't know that I'm seeing that. Technology has a way of coming really fast, especially in hindsight. But if you go back and look at it, it takes a minute. I remember the year of mobile was every year for like a decade where, mobile's going to take over everything this year. And then it would be next year. It just took a minute. And nope, it's still going to be next year. And eventually, mobile is now the way people get online. It's the way we, interact digitally. Yeah, we have our laptops and our desktops, but the vast majority of traffic is on mobile. But it didn't happen overnight the way we predicted. And funny enough, I was watching some TV show from the 1980s, 90s with my wife, and which seems so incredibly dated now. And somebody on the show said, HD TV, that is the coming thing. Like it's going to take over. And I was like, oh my God, this is the 90s, and somebody with or early 90s, and somebody's talking about HD TV. Like that took a minute. That did not come about suddenly before, well before 2000. It was longer. So I'm going to predict that AI, while the long-term impacts are going to be every bit as disruptive as we all think they will, but in the short term, I think it's going to take a minute. So that's just one. And then maybe on another that I think is a little easier to predict and probably would be along the lines with what a lot of people would say about email is regulation and guidelines will continue to evolve, will get more stringent. And when I say guidelines, I'm thinking inbox providers. It's the Gmails, the Yahoos, the Microsofts. They're, as they already have in the past couple of years, increasing the level of requirements they have for particularly bulk senders. You're going to send a lot of email into a Gmail inbox. You've got to meet some requirements that were not set for you 5 years ago. And I imagine those will continue to evolve as those inbox providers look to have more control and impact over consumers' email inbox experience. Those would be two quick ones.
Well, on that note, what do you see, Tom, as the obstacles that stop people from being successful in email today and tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that I've actually thought about recently. I moderated a panel at Affiliate World Budapest this year, so a few months ago. And it was we're talking about people getting into email. You have data. If you're not in email, you really should, and all the reasons why it made all the sense in the world, which is very easy for all of us as email marketers. We see that value. But the thing that started to come through to it also was all the steps. Like if you wanted to just start email, it's hard. Like it's not, as simple as, say, social. And not to say any marketing channel is simple. They all have challenges. None of them are easy to do well. One thing that can be much easier is just ramping. And so if you're in social, it's really about money. You have budget? Okay, you can build out some ads. You can get on and start spending money. If you're doing display advertising, online, money. Do you have a big budget? The more budget you have, the more ads you can deliver, the more media placements you could purchase, you can get in front of more consumers. Email doesn't work that way. You need an email list. And we well know that you can't just go out and buy an email list and suddenly mail it and anticipate that that's going to work for you. Good chance that list is not compliant and isn't really going to get you in hot water anyway, but it just doesn't work that way. Even if you have a massive list of emails in your database, you've got a CRM that's got 1 million emails in it, but you've never really emailed these people. You can't just tomorrow flip the switch, send an email out to all 1 million and anticipate it's going to work. They're not going to get delivered, number one. You're going to have problems literally before you start. So I think one of the basics is just it's not simple to decide one day as a company, hey, let's just get into email. Again, even if you have an email list, there are so many steps you need to take. You guys know, obviously, you're going to need to cleanse that list. You're going to need to verify and validate everything on there. You're going to need to, warm up an IT. You're going to have to slowly ease your way into this whole process. And these are all people who weren't expecting to hear from you anyway. So there's going to be no engagement. And all of those things are going to impact your sender reputation. And you can pretty much shoot yourself in the foot right off the bat if you start off wrong. Just sabotage your long-term email program efforts. So it's complicated. It's like there's just a lot to it. And again, the nature of doing email well is complex. When I got into it back in the mid to late 1990s, there was to some extent like, yeah, I got a list. I hit send, create some copy. Back then you couldn't send graphics necessarily. It was all text. I send. And for the most part, it gets delivered. As long as my email addresses are real, there's a real email address out there. It's going to go somewhere. It's going to hit an inbox because there just wasn't the kind of environment we live in today. But now, yeah, I've got to, I've got all of these, I've got a tech stack that I have to put into place, partners that I need to help me along the way so that my email gets delivered. And then, there's an opportunity for people to click on it. And then there's a website for them to go to, buy a product or whatever it happens to be. So there's a lot involved in it. And I think, compliance has become more and more complex. And certainly that's, our area of expertise, our sweet spot at Optismo is way back in the day, there really weren't any rules in a sense. You had some basic rules about marketing, but as is typical, legislation in every country is always behind. Technology goes much faster than regulation can ever possibly hope to achieve. So early days of email, yeah, you could just send and it was easy in a sense. And a lot of people made a lot of money. And then regulation comes in because the government often, I'm sure there's rightly and wrongly, not going to get into that, but they recognize that, oh boy, there needs to be some guardrails. And, whether they do them right or not is always, I think, debatable. But in the US, we ended up with the Can-Spam Act, which I think by and large became a very business friendly or at least business adaptable kind of set of rules where, a company could still market. And it didn't say you couldn't use email for marketing, and it just set up some guidelines for how to do it. Didn't say you couldn't send to people who hadn't subscribed. You could send out a cold email. Just follow the rules in, giving people a way to opt out, honoring the opt out, those kind of things. And so compliance with laws in the early days of regulation was fairly simple. But here we are now, 20 plus years later from the Can-Spam Act coming out, and we've got data privacy laws in over 20 states in the United States that are all a little bit different. We've got business codes that have particular requirements about emails that are sent out for marketing. And then you go outside the United States, and of course, you've got data privacy laws like GDPR, CASL, which is, email related and purely in Canada, a host of regulatory developments that have made email far more complicated to do in a compliant manner, especially again on a global scale. So compliance is tricky. And you need to make sure you're doing it right because you want to build as you're building any email marketing program, any marketing program, your intention shouldn't be to be, one and done. It's, you want to use this over the course of time to build your business and maintain it and continue making this a core part of your marketing program. Well, to do that, you need to be compliant because otherwise you won't be able to do that. So that's a big piece. And then just, I think, other aspects of it, getting buy-in in your company, is a reason companies don't necessarily do it. Email's old school, and I think people, especially in marketing and certainly outside of marketing, think, oh, let's do something, let's do the shiny new thing. What's this social sounds cool. I remember when, Snapchat, I had some conversation I was in a, B2B tech company years and years ago. And somebody on my marketing team was just sure that the thing we needed to do was Snapchat. And I just candidly looked at her like she was crazy. I said, hey, admittedly, I'm not the audience. Maybe you're right. We'll test this, but I'm not quite sure that a tech platform for business, that Snapchat's the right place for us to be focusing our efforts from a branding standpoint. That was correct. I mean, it didn't do much for us when we tested it. But yeah, I think all of that lends itself to email being, a challenging medium to get good at, to start and then to succeed long term. That's probably why, not everybody gets into it.
Well, I like to tell people because sometimes people will say, I don't know what a certain thing is. And that's the norm, actually. There's so much, and each person, has their area of expertise. And I'm just curious from you, because this being your area of expertise, do most marketers know about, as I mentioned at the beginning, this email suppression list management? Is this something that most people know about?
It's a good question. You know, I would say yes and no. I think if you are an acquisition marketer or you're a marketing company that's marketing on other people's behalf in the affiliate space, as an example, you fully understand what suppression lists are for. You get it. It's just part of your mailing routine because you're mailing offers from other companies. And as part of that mailing process, you are going to have suppression files from those other companies. There are going to be unsubscribes, people have said, hey, I don't want to hear from you, Mr. Brand, and those will extend to the affiliate. They could be files of current customers where the brand says, hey, affiliate marketer, I want you to focus on net new. I want new customers from you. You don't need to mail my existing customers. I'll take care of that. So again, suppression file for that mailer of all current customers. So I think people in that space, in the acquisition side of email, yeah, I think that there's a common understanding of what suppression files are for at a very standard level. I think if you're a CRM mailer, you're mailing your house file, you're just, again, sending out newsletters to subscribers. I think it's not that you don't understand it, but it's not something you may spend a ton of time on. If you're just mailing your own list through your CRM, ESP, your HubSpot, what have you, you don't have to think too much about suppression files on kind of a normal basis because the unsubscribes are being collected and suppressed automatically behind the scenes. You don't really have to even think about it. I think a lot of email marketers prefer not to think about it because those are people who it's like saying no. Nobody likes rejection. So, it's just, okay, out of sight, out of mind. I don't have to think about it. My list just, some people fell off my list after the last newsletter went out because they don't want it anymore. I don't want to think about those people. So I don't know if they give a ton of thought to it, except when potentially they get into certain audience targeting scenarios where it can make more sense to suppress, say, a segment of your audience or a list that you have from an upcoming mailing, as opposed to trying to positively identify the people you're looking for. Sometimes you have the big list, let's pull some people out of it. That can be easier than building the list and just not having those people there in the first place, if that makes sense. So I think probably everybody in email at least has a understanding of it, but I think people on the acquisition side, it's more part of their day-to-day.
I think everybody has seen headlines related to email mishaps or even, some would even use the word crimes. But I'm curious, how serious should somebody take compliance? I know that human nature sometimes is, it won't happen to me, but what says you?
Very. It has to be the core, one of the foundations of your email program. Again, if your plan is to build a long-term email program, you need to be compliant. It's just, obviously this doesn't speak to people who are out there sending phishing emails and stuff like that because, they don't care. But if you have a legitimate business and email marketing is going to be a part of that, you 100% have to be compliant, period. It's just it's not a negotiable thing. So the key then is understanding what you need to comply with. And again, the table stakes for rules like canned spam are well understood, well established. And most email marketing, even the software you're going to use, is going to make it very, hopefully, easy to comply. But you've got to keep in mind also things like, not using deceptive subject lines, and this is sort of marketing compliance in general, that you can't be out deceiving the public, and I know deceptive can be a subjective term, but I think, sometimes, and again, everybody's got their own standard, but I've often heard people say, if my grandmother would be really confused by it, then that's probably something we shouldn't do, keep it understandable. And so I think compliance, is absolutely, it's a non-negotiable starter for anybody getting into email or marketing in general. Yeah. And you're making a good point in that it's not just about you staying out of trouble. It also, in the long run, it's going to help you. Your design is to be successful. And one of the ways you do that is through compliance. Now, I look at a lot of forums. I don't comment, but I read them. And every year it's always the same. People say oh, next year, our email game, we're either doubling down or we're really going to take it serious. What would you say to someone who feels like they're in the minor leagues and they want to be major league when it comes to email marketing? What should they do? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know that, I don't like to call it minor leagues versus major leagues in email. Every email program is unique. And so if you've got a smaller business, you're probably never going to be emailing tens of millions of people. There's no realistic way for you to build a list like that. And why would you want to? It's not necessary for potentially your small business, selling a small product that, you create. A lot of examples come to mind, but, nothing doesn't have to be anything specific. That doesn't mean you can't be fantastic at the craft of email marketing. And in fact, you could be much better at it than somebody who is sending 10 million emails. That, in a sense, if we think of the major leagues as just a volume play, yeah, you could be doing a little spray and pray, that again, the way email used to be done 20, 30 years ago, where you would just hit send on millions of emails and just wait to see who responded and collect your revenue. No, now it's much more about really that honing in on the right email to the right person at the right time, with the right offer, and getting good at that. And so when I think minor leagues, major leagues, I don't think it's definitely not about volume. It's really just about getting better at the craft, and that's improving the engagement and the responsiveness of your audience. And that comes down to your email practices, and compliance can be part of that, obviously, really dialing in your audience segmentation and making sure, you know as much as you can about what interests your recipients, and then give them what they want. That's marketing 101. Put a compelling message in front of the right audience, and they're a lot more likely to engage with that and respond. And there's my dogs barking in the background to, you always have to have somebody walk on set when you're doing it.
Yeah. I live for those moments, believe it or not. I always love it. Dogs are always welcome, in my opinion. Now, you have gone on the record acknowledging, as I said, that you're an OG in this space. If there was a theme song that played anytime you walked into an industry event, but let's say it went beyond that. You go to the gym and you just hear this song playing. And it's like, oh, that's Tom Wozniak. What would that song be?
Admittedly, I have no idea. It does remind me, though, there was a movie from back going back to the 80s. Apparently, I'm on an 80s kick. There's I don't know if it was a good movie, but I remember it fondly. It's called I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker.
Yeah.
And it was the Wayans brothers, and before they were as big as they became. But the hero, by the end of the movie, like one of the things that the hero got was theme music. And what it was a bunch of musicians that would walk behind you on the street and like play your theme music. That was immediately what came to mind. And I was like, what the heck would that music be? Like you said, when I walk into the gym or a room or something, my musical taste is pretty eclectic. It's kind of all over the place, other than, I stay away from not too much opera, not too much bluegrass, not even a lot of country. So I don't know, depending on my mood that day, maybe some fun EDM. Maybe some classic rock. That's probably a little more in line with my age and and I guess, like you said, OG status in the industry, which is really just because I've been around so darn long. I don't know that it speaks to anything beyond that. Longevity.
Well, speaking of that longevity, can you remember around the time when it just seems like email gets bigger and bigger year after year. Was there a time when you thought, okay, email is just, it's the channel?
Yeah, my career goes back to like it's spanned. Email has been a part of it kind of throughout, but I really started in marketing, and email early on. Email wasn't that big of a channel. Again, in the late 1990s, it was something we did, but it was a lot of people I talked to who were marketers didn't really think much of email. I worked at one of the first .coms. I think the first .com I worked at. One of the projects that I helped our website owner with was building the email list, because he hadn't really thought about it. He's like, oh yeah, is that something we should do? It's like, yeah, it sounds like something we should do. Let's massively collect more emails from our customers so that we can email them, and I don't have to, because I was more on the print side then. It's like, I can stop sending them as many catalogs and we can send them more email. It's a lot cheaper, and I'll bet you we'll make more money. Maybe that, going back to then, was when I started recognizing the value of it. But even then, it was very early days. I think it was an overtime thing, where now, being, again, somebody who's been here, done this for a long time, I look at email as a bit of the grandfather of digital marketing channels, if you think about it. Now we digital is marketing in a sense. Back then, offline was marketing and digital was this new thing. Websites, okay, we had them, but not everybody had easy access and bandwidth was terrible. People were on dial-up. So email was certainly a growing way to connect and get your offer out, but it wasn't a fully understood and established marketing medium at that point. It's kind of novel in a lot of ways. I look at it now and yeah, it's the one that stood the test of time. And certainly other channels remain, they're all around too, but boy, none of them have been around as long. It's the OG digital marketing channel for a reason. And again, getting back to, like I said, grows every year. It's not going away when more email is sent every year, over year, constantly, year after year. And that's not changing. So I don't know if there was some magic moment, when I can point to when I just recognized kind of all that email was. I think it was just an over time. And again, now I look back on it and really do see it as, for a lot of companies, email's the center. It's the core of their marketing and everything else kind of revolves around it. And I think that's today a very logical place for it to be for an awful lot of marketers.
Very well put. Now, on the note of predictions, is there something that you think is on its way out with email, maybe in the next few years or next 5 years, or that you just wish would go away?
Beyond just, the real bad practices in email, I think this is just all of us as consumers, not even in the space, we also have a vested interest in it as marketers. But if we could all just clean up the true black hat stuff in email, the phishing, the malware, just all of that junk, boy, wouldn't it? I mean, it would be better. I think fortunately, the spam filters, at least mine, do a really good job of catching the vast majority of that. And that's awesome. Spam filters are tough because they also catch stuff that you, as a marketer, we wish it wouldn't. But at least my inbox, they do a really good job of catching all the really, malicious kind of stuff. It's rare for those things to get through. Does happen, but doesn't happen very often. So, I wish that would all go away. I think society would be better, industry would be better because we just wouldn't have to deal with it. And I think the perception among consumers of email would be better if that stuff wasn't there. Sadly, I don't know that I could predict that. I could just wish it. But as far as things that I think, really may go away, boy, that's tricky. Email is so, from a marketing standpoint, it's really always evolving and self-optimizing, because from a marketing standpoint, people stop doing what doesn't work and keep doing what does and then testing new things. And because at the end of the day, it's business and it's about driving performance. And so, what drives more engagement, more sales, that's what's going to stick, and things that won't. I do think there are, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but there are things that have popped up in the industry, that seemed like there was some potential. Bimmy comes to mind, where, again, a brand's logo could be kind of sitting there in the inbox, as a brand indicator, maybe a bit of validation for that email really came from the brand. I don't know if consumers care. So that's something that I know seemed to be getting. I heard from an awful lot of people for a number of years that was really a coming thing. Yeah, I don't know that I've seen it. I don't see it in my inbox, put it that way. I don't notice it if it's there. And if I'm not noticing it, then I'm going to guess consumers aren't either. So that might be a something that, at least from the email marketing standpoint, was perceived to be something that was coming. I'm just not so sure.
Definitely a lot of different opinions on that one. Now, for my last question, I always love to ask this question. What can anybody who's watching this, anybody at all who's watching or reading it, what can they do to make today better?
Philosophical. I think this is going to get in, again, a little more personal philosophy, but I believe really strongly in being as positive as you can, appreciating every day. None of it's guaranteed, as in our, jobs, personal lives, physical lives. And there's no guarantees for tomorrow. So I think, appreciating what you have today and taking a positive outlook on damn near everything that you can, that's a good way to start your day. Try to start mine that way. Sometimes you got to remind yourself. It doesn't It's not always instinctive, but I think we all often, many of us, go through something in our lives that becomes really disruptive, a health crisis or challenge, personal relationships, all kinds of things. And getting through those for me can be that reminder that's like, boy, I really appreciate what you got, because things could be a lot worse.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, Tom. And since this is the last email talk of 2025, I'll just remind everybody, floss every day, don't be naughty, eat your greens, clean your list, and remember compliance. Don't forget compliance. Tom Wozniak, thank you so much for spending time with me. I've enjoyed this greatly.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.